Welcome to Chapter 15, Early Medieval Art in Europe. I hope that you enjoyed this lecture. My name is Professor Klotz. Please be sure to take notes. The roughly 1,000 years of European history between the dissolution of the Western Roman Empire during the 5th century and the Florentine Renaissance in the 15th century are generally referred to as the Middle Ages, or as the medieval period we read in our textbook. Terming these years as the Middle Ages reflects the view of Renaissance humanists who regarded this time as a period of decline. However, it was actually a period of great artistic innovation. Art historians generally divide the Middle Ages into three periods or phases, and they are early medieval, Romanesque, and Gothic. We are currently in the early medieval chapter, and within the Romanesque chapter, we will see more churches, and in Gothic, we will see lots of Gothic cathedrals, especially. So within this lecture, we will identify the visual hallmarks of early medieval art for formal, technical, and expressive qualities, especially within illuminated books. We will also assess the Carolingian and Ottonian revival of Roman artistic traditions. So if you open up our textbook to chapter 15, the first image that you're going to view is a page from the Book of Kells. Now, the Book of Kells is originally made probably made in Iona, Scotland. So it could be either from Scotland or Ireland, but it's likely from Scotland, and it's from the late 8th or possibly early 9th century. And this is a book that contains the four Gospels. So it's an illustrated book, meaning that it's an illuminated book or an illuminated manuscript written on vellum containing the four Gospels. It's illustrated with ornamentation. The manuscript introduces Matthew's account of Jesus's birth with a monogram of Christ. There are spiral motifs throughout. So again, it's again from either Scotland or Ireland originally. Now, the Book of Kells was in Scotland at the time that Vikings had attacked, and the monks actually moved the book to Kells, Ireland to escape the Viking attacks. And so we read in our textbook that Irish monks became as famous for writing and copying books as their intense spirituality and missionary fervor. Throughout the Middle Ages and across Europe, monasteries were principal centers of art and learning, while prayer and acts of mercy represented their primary vocation. Some talented monks and nuns also worked as painters, jewelers, carvers, weavers, and embroiderers. Few, however, could claim a work of art as spectacular as this one. So, lavish gospel books were produced in workshops called scriptoria and were essential for spiritual and monastic life. The medieval scriptorium was a place where monks and nuns carefully wrote books on prepared animal skins, either vellum or parchment. Work on a book was often divided between scribes who copied texts and artists who illuminated pages with large initials and decorations. So they would copy like the Gospels and over make many copies, and they would decorate them with ornamentation and illustrations. Now, the Book of Durrow is one of the earliest surviving decorated Gospels from the 7th century. Each of the four Gospels is introduced by a three-part decorative sequence. The Gospel of Matthew is preceded by his symbol, the man. And so here we have the symbol of the evangelist Matthew, Gospel Book of Durrow. Now let's move on to the Carolingian Empire. During the second half of the 8th century, a new force emerged on the continent. Charlemagne, the French form of Carolus Magnus, Latin for Charles the Great, established a dynasty and an empire known today as the Carolingian. Under Charlemagne, the Carolingian realm reached its greatest extent, encompassing Western Germany, France, the Lombard Kingdom in Italy, and the Low Countries, according to our textbook. So Charlemagne declared himself the rightful successor of Constantine, who was the first Christian Roman emperor. Charlemagne's vision of the renewal of the Roman Empire included equestrian portraits of the emperor, basilica-planned churches, and illuminated manuscripts. And so we're going to take a look at a basilica-planned church, and this is Westwork at Corvey. And so we see imposing masonry of late 9th century architecture. The exterior displays symmetrical towers flanking a central core. The interior may have provided space for choirs, as well as a space for meeting dignitaries. And so basilica churches were very large so that pilgrims could also visit the churches too. The St. Gall plan, architects contemplated how to combine work and prayer within a community. It centers around a cloister, which is a courtyard, and features a prominent basilica church. And so here we have an example of the St. Gall plan. Illustrated books. Charlemagne sponsored the scrupulous editing and copying of key ancient and religious texts. A type of script called Carolingian minuscule increased legibility and streamlined production. So this was a standard type of script that was created. Scribes and illuminators revived, reformed, and revitalized established traditions of book production. And the Coronation Gospels, we see the portrait of Matthew, and it reflects a lifelike representation consistent with Greco-Roman tradition. Conventions for creating the illusion of solid figures in space may have also been preserved from Byzantine manuscripts. And here we have an example of St. Matthew the Evangelist. So costly manuscripts were also protected with heavy wooden covers. An example cover of the Lindau Gospels combines jewels and pearls with sculpture and gold. Its crucifix was created using a repoussé technique, or hammering up from the back. Jesus is calm and wide-eyed and seems to foreshadow his triumph over death. So here you see all of the jewels, and this is covering an illuminated manuscript, and it's called the Lindau Gospels. And again, Christ appears triumphant. Now let's move on to the Ottonian Europe. A new Saxon dynasty came to power in lands corresponding roughly to present-day Germany and Austria. We call this dynasty Ottonian after its three principal rulers, Otto I, Otto II, and Otto III. The Ottonian dynasty reestablishes Charlemagne's Christian Roman Empire in 962 when Otto I is crowned emperor. Ottonian rulers wished to replicate the grandeur of Christian architecture of Roman basilicas and their Carolingian predecessors. Large timber-roofed Ottonian cathedrals were vulnerable to fire, however, and many burned during the 11th century, unfortunately, because stone was not used by Ottonian artists. Now, later you see stone being used more in Romanesque and Gothic churches, and so we have many of those churches that have survived. Now, the convent church is designed as a basilica with westwork flanked by circular towers. It's deceptively simple in design. The alternation of heavy and light supports and round and rectangular forms prefigured the Romanesque style. So this is a prefigurement of the Romanesque style, which would then come afterward. And so here we have the interior. So Ottonian artists began a tradition also of large sculpture in wood and bronze. We read in our textbook, one of the few works of carved wood to survive from the early Middle Ages is the Giraud crucifix. Archbishop Giraud of Cologne commissioned the sculpture for his cathedral in about 970. The life-size figure of Christ is made of painted and gilded oak. So it's actually life-size. The focus here is on Jesus's human suffering. He is shown as a tortured martyr, not as the triumphant hero of the Lindau Gospels cover. It was meant to inspire pity and awe. So again, the focus here is on Christ's suffering on the cross. And so here we have also another image of the Giraud crucifix. This concludes the lecture. I hope you enjoyed the lecture. Thank you for listening.